Good evening. I'd like to call to order the regular town council meeting for Tuesday, March 13th. Please rise for a moment of silence. Let the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes.
Thank you.
Fine.
Here.
Laffin.
Here.
Paterno.
Here.
Marone.
Here.
Morgenstein.
Here.
Shortell.
Here.
Testa. Zandri.
Here.
And Chairman Cervoni.
Here. Next is the consent agenda. Can we have a motion accepting item 3D?
So moved.
Second. No. To accept 3D?
With it, the exception
With the
of.
exception of 3D. I misheard you. Okay.
All right. Madam Clerk, do you have the motion?
Is that for 3D, the acceptance?
No. We're moving the consent agenda, so the motion was to move items 3A through C and 3E through K.
Okay. And do I do a roll call now?
No. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. All those in favor of those items on the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Those items passed. On to item 4. 3D has been removed from the consent agenda. Can I have a motion on that?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the State of Connecticut Transit-Oriented Development Grant and approve an appropriation of funds in the amount of $210,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Councilor Morgenstein, you were first to remove.
Yeah, so I placed a telephone call to Casey, just wanting more information. We obviously want to develop a good transit-oriented development zone. I don't feel there's been a ton of discussion about it, so Mary Mashinsky has offered to let us know some that she knows. I think because of the snow, someone that was going to come with her may not be here, and it looks like we don't have Casey either, but work looking into this study has gone forward, so I wanted to hear some about it.
Mayor?
I think it would be appropriate, Rob Baltramitis is here, and he's part of
Great,
his head of engineering, and they were the ones who developed
great.
the grant, so I think he should speak to it.
Okay, yeah, I didn't see him. Hi, Rob.
Good evening. And actually, I was speaking with Casey this afternoon. She does intend on being here, so I didn't know if you wanted to give her a couple of minutes, because she could certainly speak in depth about the TOD, the traffic-oriented development study that's been done already. I could talk about the grant application, but it sounded like you were kind of really looking for some of that background study work that's been completed.
The study that we have worked on.
Yeah,
and-
she'd be better to speak
Yeah,
about that particular.
So if we'd like to wait for Casey, we can
move on.
step away from this for a moment and move on to something else.
Or like I said, I'd be happy to talk about what this request for a resolution is all about, which is the grant application itself.
Why don't we do it all at once?
Okay. All right, well,
So,
let's give her an opportunity. Like I said, she indicated she would be here.
thank you. We'll come back to this. All right, on to item 5, the public question and answer period.
Mr. Chairman, do you have to do anything with that? There's a motion on it, right?
There's a motion on the floor, and we'll come back to it.
Okay, thank you.
Name and address for the record, please.
Alita Sella, 241 North Whittlesey Avenue Extension in Wallingford. I just wanted to come and speak about the pool. I have done an informal survey over Facebook for the town. I had about 200 respondents who responded overwhelmingly. I was just looking at statistics, I almost missed my time, but 93% of respondents said they were in favor of having the pool funded for this year, and I was very glad to see that it has been funded for this year. But I think that indicates also for the future, there's very, very strong support for that. Reasons why people did not purchase passes or have not purchased passes again, it wasn't about price, it was more about inconvenient hours, not, the hours weren't long enough. Not enough places to purchase the pass, so purchasing the pass was inconvenient, and inconvenient dates, it's not open long enough in the season. In addition to that, people selecting one of those as a reason why they didn't purchase a pass, some combination of those three reasons were a reason why they didn't purchase a pass, and that was over 90% of the respondents said that was why they didn't purchase a pass. So I thought that was very important information to share. There were 80% of people said they would purchase a day pass, meaning if they had a season's pass themselves and they had friends or family who they wanted to bring, they would purchase a day pass, so that would be additional revenue and passes for the pool. And things that people wanted added to the pool. So the splash pad, interestingly, only about 17% of people said they wanted a splash pad, but food, or some combination of amenities there, rotating food trucks, live music, swim lessons, which I discovered were actually already there, were a very important factor in that. So hours, the length of the year, and then things to do. The comment section was very revealing, and of course I can't summarize those because the comments were so varied, but really what came up was, you know, I get home at 6 o'clock, the pool closes at 7. There's no food there. You know, by the time I feed myself and get there, the pool's closed. I don't have any time with my kids to play or do anything. So the longer hours, and then in the morning, I've got little kids. They nap at 10, you know, and then I gotta feed them lunch. By the time the pool is open, half my day is gone, and I'm not going at 3, you know, if I go at 2 o'clock, then they got to nap at 3. So those kinds of challenges with young kids. So just wanted to share that information, and I'd be happy to share those survey results with anybody in more detail if they're interested. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps before you leave, you could get the council's email address, and if you have those in a format you can email to us, you can do that. Thank you. Mr. Morgenstein.
Larry Morgenstein, South Main Street. Recently, through the chair to the mayor or to anybody that could talk to it, the other day there was some update in terms of the possible lawsuit against the pharmaceutical companies. Could you give us any update on that?
I think the law department is most appropriate for that.
We have selected a firm, and the first step is to examine all the data that they're requesting that we put together to review to see where the town would stand in terms of bringing a lawsuit. So it's really at the very initial stages. Once we do that and the firm advises us as to how to proceed, then we would be able to talk more about it.
So at this point, having selected a firm, it still has to come back at some point and be approved for formal entering into this agreement?
No, we would be all set.
It would be all set. A different question to the council and to the mayor is that the other day, or the last meeting, we talked about the pension fund. And there's 200 million in the pension fund. And of that, roughly 140 is in stocks. Now, a lot of institutions have decided over time to do what they call socially conscious stocks. In some ways, here it is, we're challenging as a town the pharmaceuticals for the damage it's done to our citizens. Yet, probably, most likely, our pension fund is invested in stocks. in pharmaceuticals. What I'm suggesting is, could we look into that? And why would we want to be profiting and helping the pharmaceuticals profit when at the same time we're saying they're doing damage and costing the town money?
Well, as a member of the pension board, obviously, I'd like to invite you to our next quarterly meeting. If you want to just jot me down your contact information, I'll make sure we post it in with the clerk, but we can make sure we get it to you and certainly state your position then. But, and I can only speak for myself as one of the 6 commissioners, but we owe a fiduciary responsibility to the pensioners, the employees, and frankly, the citizens, taxpayers and ratepayers, to the best we can, and to take the role of what is called a prudent fiduciary, not a prudent personal investor, but a prudent fiduciary investor. And whereas certainly socially conscious investments are great to think about and maybe to have in your portfolio, you certainly don't want to violate the tenets of what we're entrusted to do. But we'd be interested in certainly listening to what you have to say. If you'd like to come to the next meeting, jot me down when is the best time to contact you and a number that I can reach, and I'll get that to you.
Yeah, I know that it's not an easily accomplished thing, but again, we're making a conscious choice to invest, and as you say, it's our responsibility to make a profit for the people of the town and its employees and its pension fund. But at the same time, we're talking about investing and helping along and profiting from the very thing we're challenging right now.
And I think we also have to be careful. I don't disagree with you, by the way. But we have to be careful too as to where we draw the line into what is socially acceptable.
Sure,
Do we invest in General Motors? They pollute the environment. I see your point that we are taking potential legal action against opioid manufacturers. I don't know of any opioid manufacturers are in our stock portfolio, to be frank with you. If they are part of a mutual fund where there's millions of other investors, because we do not own any stock individually anymore.
No.
We owe them in sort of institutional pension funds, if you will. So, but we'd also have to be careful because it's a lot of folks coming forward to say, well, we shouldn't invest in this, we shouldn't invest in that, and it's like, who do you listen to, who do you draw the line? But like I said, I'd invite you to the next meeting if you'd like to just please jot me down your information and either give it to me tonight or send it to me, and I'll make sure that you know that when the next quarterly meeting is.
Yeah, the only thing I'd just add is that, again, if we really want to make a statement as a town, as a state, as municipalities, we're joining with other municipalities in a suit to make a point against the pharmaceuticals. I would bet you that probably each municipality that is involved in that suit may be doing the same. And if really we could do it with other towns, we could have an impact that might be greater in some ways than that lawsuit individually can. So it's just something for people to consider. It's not easily accomplished, but it's been done with endowment funds for colleges. They've divested from fossil fuels. There's been other things, and you're perfectly right in terms of it is a slippery slope. Where do you start distinguishing? And that's what's made it difficult to do, but it can be accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you for your point.
Thank you. Anyone else for public question and answer? There being none, I close public question and answer. I note that on the consent agenda, item 3J, we did reappoint Patrick Burney to the Public Utilities Commission for a 3-year term, and Mr. Burney is here. If you'd like to come up and get sworn, now would be a good time. Thank you for your service. All right, and I don't see Ms. Hand here yet, so on to item 6, which is to conduct a public hearing and consider an act on an ordinance regarding stormwater management. Attorney Small.
Yes, this is the ordinance that we discussed in the ordinance committee. The purpose of this ordinance is to comply with our stormwater permit with DEEP. It requires us to have an ordinance to deal with illegal discharges into our stormwater system. So the whole point of this is to indicate to the public that that is illegal and that we will, when found and discovered, take enforcement action. That is the purpose of this ordinance.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Are there any comments from the public on the stormwater management ordinance? Representative Mashinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish to go on record in support of the ordinance. Stormwater is impacted by urban runoff and improper connections. You seem to have covered both of them in the ordinance. It's well done, and it'll help curb excess nutrients, materials that the sewage treatment plant cannot handle, and other contaminants that impact the water quality in the Quinnipiac River and also Long Island Sound. So well done, and hope you will approve it tonight.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Mr. Burney?
Patrick Burney, 238 South Main Street, and a member of the Wallingford Public Utilities Commission. I stand in support as a member of the commission in favor of the ordinance. And stormwater that is unlawfully getting into our sewer system causes, obviously, an increased demand on our sewer treatment power plant. And that in turn costs the town increased money. So for the reasons stated by Representative Mashinsky, I also stand in support of the ordinance.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? There being none, I close the public hearing and I bring it back to the council for a motion and discussion. Can I have a motion to approve the ordinance?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Comments from the council. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Janice, the town engineer is the enforcing body here. Is that unique? I don't recall the town engineer having enforcement power like this.
No, I don't think it's unique. Other towns on this particular ordinance have actually put a town manager in charge of it, which didn't seem to make sense to me. It could have been Public Works, but we've had a working group about this, compliance with the DEEP regulation and the creation of the permit. We've had Public Works, Engineering, Planning and Zoning, Inland Wetlands. Did I forget somebody? No, that's it, right? And through all the review, it really, I think, comes back to the engineering department being the appropriate department. I don't know if Rob wants to say, he didn't kick and scream when I put him in there. I think it seemed that he was the most logical person to do it. But in terms of in general law, there's nothing wrong with him having empowered powers by virtue of an ordinance.
Yeah, I'm just concerned with, I know we had a town engineer and an assistant town engineer until recently, and to my knowledge, we don't have an assistant town engineer.
I think we do, don't we?
Do we?
We do, yes.
Okay, news to me. So I'm just, this is something important.
Yes.
We're gonna take it serious, is the office able to take on, what we hear is a large problem?
Well, one, Rob and I discussed whether or not, who was the appropriate authority, and I think we both agreed that it would really be his office. So I just think it works. I don't know if Rob wants to speak to that or not. But, it's an important ordinance as to how time-consuming everything it gets. It's generally a complaint type ordinance. We're not likely to stumble on somebody doing this, although it's possible.
Yeah, I guess what I would add is, we do have an assistant town engineer, but you're right, overall, when I first came to the town 18 years ago, our department was 10 and a half people. We're currently 4 and a half, so that's a drastic reduction. So I certainly want to be very careful in taking on new duties, but as you stated, this is a very important one, and I do think it should rest with engineering. If it rises to the level of really tasking the minimum resources we have, I would approach the mayor and perhaps look to add staff at some point in the future. But, from what I can tell over the last couple of years with reports that have come in, I don't expect it to be overwhelming.
Okay, Janice, you indicated that in discussion, some other office is going to be handling this. What office is that?
I did what?
You said something about that some other office was going to be handling a portion of this?
I don't think I said that. Tonight? If I did, I didn't mean to say that, no.
In your
It's
discussions?
engineering, no, I'm sorry, no. What I said was in terms of the MS4 permit with DEEP, we've had a working group of those various departments. We've worked together, and certainly throughout that process, it's helped me to figure out that really engineering is the proper department to do that. We have an ongoing, the MS4 permit has a great many of obligations, particularly the newest permit. There have been a lot of revisions to it, and it involves various departments of the town in order to comply, come up with a plan, and enforce the plan. So that's really what I was referring to. We've had this ongoing working group.
So how does engineering find out about these violations?
It's really going to be on a complaint made for the most part. We have, the complaint form is on the town's website. And I think engineering has gotten calls in the past from people saying it, and I think also maybe not maybe planning and zoning, but maybe wetlands has also gotten phone calls. People report to the town that somebody neighbor may be changing the oil on their car, and they dump the excess oil into the catch basin, and some people will report that. So it would go to engineering department for investigation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Mayor?
Just to the issue of staffing, this is a perfect example of where the state of Connecticut has abandoned its responsibilities and deposited them on the local communities. They've ramped up significantly the duties with regard to the MS4 permits and provide no funding and just say, towns, you do this. So ultimately you end up with some very tough questions. We're in no better condition than anyone else to start adding staff, but that's the root of it. They're requiring a lot more, they provide no money, and we're going to do the best we can.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Morgenstein?
Yes, can I ask what the acronym MS4 is?
Municipal storm water, what's the fourth? Small.
Small
Yes.
storm.
Small storm, wait a minute.
It's 4 S's.
Small municipal separate storm sewer systems.
Yeah. I tried Googling, I had no success. So, yeah, the state gives us a lot of things to do, but we are a community that has a responsibility to our town and our water and our environment. And, I would just take a step further, the question of enforcement. So the mechanism for, I call because I see someone pouring something down a stormwater and it's Saturday and the person calling doesn't know it's on the website. Are there departments, do the police know the mechanism of who it goes to down the line, how to get it to the engineering department?
I would imagine the police would probably tell them to call someone at the town hall. I don't know. I mean, we can make that contact and.
I mean, I think the reality is that we're, an 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 town hall without people have come to kind of expect that things aren't on the website, and I applaud us that it will be on the website. But I would just say, as we're, trying to work a little bit towards making Rob's life manageable, if people from, one part of the line down, and maybe Henry has an answer.
Well, yeah,
Well, if someone reported, for example, someone putting motor oil in a catch basin, and they called the police department, Public Works has people on call 24 hours a day, so they would call Public Works and they would make note of that.
So it'd be comparable to a tree coming down,
Yes,
and then the
yes.
police then make, great, okay, thank you.
one other point on that is Public Works previously under these permits has gone about putting the plate on each of the catch basins that states, you're not supposed to be pouring things down there. So the person is alerted right at the catch basin with a sign that tells them what they shouldn't be doing. Is that correct, Henry?
A lot of those are faded, yeah.
It's a decal we get from the state, and it basically says this drains to Long Island Sound.
Yeah.
So you have to be,
Oh, you have to not be paying attention. I said when we planned the ordinance that right in Simpson Court, two incidents that I've seen. One was a mother get out of her van and pour the remainder of her soda down the storm drain, and the other was a business with the water from mopping the floor. So I think a fair amount of those labels have faded, and I think if you're just kind of inadvertently doing something, you're not necessarily reading them, but yes, they're obviously important. So if we are getting them from the state, do we get like a new supply once a year or something? Because whether they're gonna, this time of year, not be visible. Great, thank you.
Any other comments from the council? There being none, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Fishbein?
Yes.
Laffin?
Yes.
Letourneau?
Yes.
Marone?
Yes.
Morgenstein?
Yes.
Shortell?
Yes.
Testa?
Yes.
Zandri?
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni?
Yes, the motion and the ordinance have passed. Going back to item 3D, which was removed from the consent agenda, this is the item on the acceptance of the TOD grant. I do see Ms. Hand in the room. If you would come forward, I believe we'd like you to participate in the discussion.
My apologies, I thought I was a little later down the line, so I was trying to take advantage of my time.
Quite all right. We actually made good use of the time.
Good, sounds like it.
Councilor Morgenstein, did you have questions for?
Yeah, so as I said before, Casey and I spoke, and having a sense of what sort of things we're looking at, so that as we do the money for the study, what, as kind of a takeoff from our POCD, has this TOD looked at? And yeah, Mr. Bultramitis as well, thank you.
Thank you. So I'm not sure how far you got with Rob before, but our Plan of Conservation and Development and the sort of simultaneous parallel tracked TOD plan that were approved in 2016 both have recommendations regarding streetscape improvements for this area. The POCD refers back to, or refers to, what was done in the TOD study. I have a few copies that I can distribute, but you'll have to share.
Sure.
So I will direct you to the POCD plan, which is the one that looks like this. I only gave you excerpts from it. And actually, the cover itself shows some of what they're talking about in terms of the proposed improvements. And then the cover of that is page 19, or the cover of the handout that I gave you. And that's page is titled Transportation Network Deficiencies. That really highlights kind of what some of the problems are that we talked about and that we're looking to address with this grant. You see this is right on, the big picture's right on Route 5, and you see a utility pole right in the middle of the sidewalk. That was that's actually right adjacent to the station area. So the state was able to correct that problem with the properties that they own, or the property that they acquired for the station, because they could basically, add to their own frontage, widen the sidewalk there. But the study identified, the TOD study identified some of those sort of standard problems in that area. So basically we have problems with connectivity between the stations and our town center area, where it's either not inviting and or not all that safe. And we're looking to make improvements to both of those problems. Part of that would also be a consideration for bicycle connectivity. The TOD plan on those later pages that I provided you, 49, I think it starts at page 49, 50, 51, and 52. Those, just get to it. Those are where the consultant made specific recommendations, or somewhat specific recommendations for the types of improvements that we could make. And again, that's looking at streetscape improvements, what can we do with the sidewalks, what can we do between the road and the sidewalks, what can we do in terms of other streetscape type improvements, and then what can we do with the utility lines. So I think the grant, what we're looking to do with the grant and what the grant money was provided for, is to hire a consultant to look at different options. I think we're sort of envisioning that we would end up with probably two or three options, or two or three sets of options, and then a cost for each of those sets of options. So I think we understand that addressing the utility poles it will be a lot more expensive than an alternative that doesn't include that. So we're looking for, here are what the options would be, and then here are what the different pricing levels would be. So we're looking to take our plan of development and the TOD plan and actually put them into action, make those next steps. So depending on the outcome of that, then we would look to actually make that happen depending on the funding that's available.
So thank you, Casey, 'cause that's very well said. I think what I'd add to that is, what we're looking to do here is a little more than a study. When we put an RFP out for a consultant, ideally it's going to be a design team of engineers, surveyors, planners, landscape architects. One of the main components is going to be doing a ground survey, field survey of the existing conditions in the study area, and also determining the existing rights-of-way and easements that are in place. So that at the end of the day, like I said, it's more than a study. We hope to actually have 2 or 3 alternative plans with cost estimates. So it's really preliminary design and engineering is the scope here as well. And the potential of undergrounding of utilities. And actually, Casey, would you mind while I'm speaking? Thank you. Just a couple more photos of overhead utilities up and down Route 5 that affect walkability and restrict ADA access on our public walks along Route 5. So addressing that issue and then potentially undergrounding the overhead utilities like the town was successful doing on Center Street so many years ago, those are things that we want to look at and get firm numbers and an understanding on.
I want to offer a very strong cautionary note to undergrounding utilities. That carries huge price tags And if that's what we're depending upon, could very well mean nothing can happen. So I don't want any false hopes, because in the past, we have looked at that, and it comes with a very high price tag.
Yeah,
And we totally understand that. We just think it needs to be one of the alternatives that we consider, and look at that price tag versus other alternatives to hopefully accomplish the same goal.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I do have a question about just that. We own the electric division. Obviously, to put things underground, you have to dig and you have to, there's other things that are under there. But do you save other things at the other end of the spectrum? I was looking to see whether my mother had a power outage on the Eversource website. And in Marlboro, there's something like 2,500 customers, and 2,483 were out of power. There is a neighborhood whose power lines are underground. I can talk till the cows come home about what you invest is sometimes what you also get back. So yeah, certainly would appreciate that we will be seeing designs with costs and with options, and knowing that it's kind of an island right now, the train station. And when we worked on the plan of conservation and development, we knew that. And so trying to link it. And if you are underground with your power along Route 5, you must gain a little bit more width for something like a bike lane. And as you're looking in a design like this at bike lanes, we have areas that are problematic. Coming up Center Street, you've got the cemetery on one side, but we don't get anywhere if we don't look and design. And so I appreciate the work going into this, that it is a step further than just a study, because I was worried 2016 was the TOD, the train station we knew was coming so many years prior to that. And here we are just studying it, but it sounds like we're really doing more than studying it, which I'm very happy to hear.
Yeah, correct, and that's why I wanted to put that out there.
Yeah,
that it is
that's
more than
great.
studying, and this would be the step before, really creating a project and then, looking to get construction funding. This is that next step, going from the study to this point.
So if we're looking at this as a project, so would you be thinking next budget cycle would be the time? Would we be that soon that we might have an opportunity to say yay or nay, or choose the one of the three?
Well, I think we could, I think we estimated it's probably a 15-month period for this project. So in other words, to do the surveys, to develop the conceptual engineering plans and the estimates. Another component is holding stakeholder meetings with the public and you folks. So we have 15 months overall. When it comes to funding, this is something that I think the town's going to look for, grant assistance on. This project here is funded through the state's OPM, Office of Policy and Management, and they are they're very proactive and gung-ho right now with TOD development. So we're hoping there's some pools of money out there, to fund the eventual construction of something like this.
And we certainly are situated. The reason we got the train station is we are situated central to everywhere. And if someone can live in Wallingford and commute to Stamford, now we should be interested in that. So in looking towards a grant, does your department have grant writers? We do not have Don Rowe any longer. If
We don't. We miss Don. We miss him for a lot of reasons. But I think we've been successful with the staff that we have, with Tim Ryan, with Susan Schott in his office, and this is an example. This is a grant application that we put out there, and we were awarded. So we're doing the best with what we have.
And Susan sort of took the lead or had the lead role in the submittal of the grant application, but the nice thing was that I think we all had several meetings. It was a very collaborative effort to get this grant, and we were very excited that we did actually get it, so.
Great. Thank you.
Counselor Zandri?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, folks.
Good evening.
I just have a couple of questions regarding, it's probably a little bit on the edge of beyond this, but it's part of what you've passed out, so I have the questions now. So, I see a lot of suggested enhancements with respect to the roadway, bicycle lanes, and the sidewalks. I'm gonna make the assumption, and it's halfway, and ask that, when we get into the study that's being done here, we're gonna be looking at, I presume, trying to get rights of way to actually, you're effectively expanding the roadway, because there's no way to add what we're looking to add here, including the on-street parking, with the existing width in that road right now.
I think that came up as, I think Mr. Fishbein brought that up actually as part of the discussion during the TOD plan, and there was the consultant at the time felt that we did have sufficient width to make their proposal, their streetscape proposal that's shown in there, to make that happen. But I think that's really, now we're taking the plan in the book and saying, okay, how do we make it happen in real life? And so this development, this grant, what we're going to do is look at exactly what are the right-of-way widths, and that's what the consultant will do. What are the right-of-way widths? What can we really fit with what we have? Certainly, the town wouldn't be looking to take property or to widen the right-of-way. It's not our right-of-way to widen anyhow. So we really have to work with what we have and see what the consultant can provide us.
I guess it almost begs the question, the fact that that's a good portion of what I'm looking at, being North Colony, is Route 5 and a state road.
Right.
I mean, I've been walking this area of town my whole entire life. I grew up on South Cherry Street, walked to Rose's Deli. I still do it today from where I am. This whole area gets completely congested depending on the volume of cars that are backing up at the double lights that are going northbound as you approach Parker Street. So when I see things like bicycle lanes, the only thing I'm seeing here is people on bikes getting cut off because of the way they block the side streets. People don't let anybody in or out of those side streets. Then the people that are headed southbound can't make the turn because the streets are blocked. So, I mean, I almost ask the question, are we engaging with the state to find out if we can actually, other than just putting, in some sections here, I see the left turn lanes for Christian and Parker Street, why are we not considering going 2 lanes of traffic both directions through there?
The study actually recommends the traffic calming measures, not the opposite of that. So the study actually looks to, because we're looking at our town center area, if we want to make it walkable, we don't want cars going too fast up and down that road. I agree with you, so I would prefer, I think the preference is probably, again, this will come out of this process, but I think the preference is to lean towards the sidewalk improvements and those types of improvements, maybe a small safety buffer between the sidewalk and the road over having the bicycle lanes. I think the bicycle lanes are just maybe not as feasible on Route 5. So that will be part of this conversation when we hire the.
Because I'm just going, again, and a lot of it is what I've observed walking around, because you see a lot of this town at 3 miles an hour. So I just see these bike lanes, and I love the idea, because I ride my bicycle downtown, but I can see people right now waiting behind somebody trying to make a left-hand turn. They're gonna pop out because they can cut in and around, and they're gonna knock somebody off a bike. That's my main concern, but I understand your mindset when you mention, well, we don't really want to go wider, because that tends to let people be more free. So thinking about it with that perspective, I kind of get it. So it may be a big re-education to people, almost like, hey, listen, this is a 25-mile-an-hour area of Route 5. They really got to get that through their head. It's not farther up, down over here where it's 40. It's not 35 like it is farther north. Because I will tell you, I really see the Parker Place apartments beefing up that whole area, and all of these other potential future redevelopment sites, they will come to pass as people start using that train. I know it for a fact. I watched it happen down in Milford. I watched it happen down in South Norwalk. It might take 20 full years to see even a portion of it, but once it's there, I mean, building a road is not an easy thing to do, so I'm glad we're looking at some of this. I have to agree with Councilor Morgenstein. I would like to see options like the underground utilities, even if it's something that it's only like a 5% chance that we're gonna do it, because like you mentioned, on the west side of that road, all those telephone poles are right there. There's hydrants right in the sidewalk, not curbside, dead center. So, I mean, these are all types of different things that we have to look at through this area. So, I mean, I appreciate the effort, and I can definitely see that a lot of forethought is going into it, so I hope we continue and maintain with that. So I really appreciate the information too, so thank you.
If I could add, because obviously as a TOD, you know, there's a lot of focus on the pedestrian connectivity between the train station and the downtown area. But this is going to be a fine balance, and it's again why I said this. Ideally, we'll have a consultant that's a team of engineers, planners, landscape architects, because you know it's the pedestrian connectivity, you know, but it's all balanced out with traffic circulation and on-street parking. You know, and it all has to be looked at and evaluated and properly weighed and flushed out. And one example that I could think of is the pavement area on Hall Avenue, just west of Route 5. You know, one of the things I'd like to see come out of this is looking at to maximize some on-street parking for the public, because it seems to be an underutilized with the pavement at that location.
And I agree, and even the other, it just reminded me when you said the west side there of Route 5 is that, you know, people's natural tendency, if they're walking towards the train station from that side, they're going to want to walk up that portion of North Cherry Street where there's no sidewalk. It's not natural for people to go to the other side, walk up, and then cross. And actually, that's somewhat problematic, because they won't go all the way to Parker Street. Even if they were to do that, they'll try to cross in the middle of the road. So I like the fact that it shows the design to put a sidewalk on that side, because we also have to consider the people that are living at Judd Square that are also going to be walking up to use the train, and people will do it. Again, it's one of those things where nobody believes it, but the reason the Shoreline East Railroad works the way it does is because people do start to adopt it. And I think that's a lot of what we'll start seeing in these smaller apartments. These efficiency studio and one-bedroom apartments are going to be those people that are going to hop a train, go down to Stamford, hop a train, go up to Hartford. I'm actually waiting for it to take off, so I want to see how it works going out from Windsor Locks, taking the shuttle over to Bradley, rather than parking my car for 3 days and paying $92. So I'm waiting to see how it works myself. So thank you again.
Thank you. Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Boy, we covered a lot of territory with this. And, you know, I've been in the downtown 18 years. I make my living in the downtown. I love our downtown. But I can't see spending money between the state and the town for a grant, a state grant. Now, the state's broke, so they're going to give us money even though they're broke. That's a state thing, okay. But it's going to cost the town share $35,000 will be funded by the town's CRA distribution fund. I could find other things to do with $35,000. But I think, you know, looking at this, it's another study. And I'm going to be real negative on this because it just irritates me. But it's another study that's not going to get done. Point blank, it's not going to get done. It's a wish list, it's a want list. Not going to happen. You know, and the mayor alluded to the utility poles. I can remember that conversation when the utility poles, when they wanted to underground them on Quinnipiac Street and going up, and I think it was also Hall Avenue and a couple other places downtown. That hit a definite roadblock. Absolutely not going to be done, no way, no how, because the cost was phenomenal. So I can't see it being done here. As far as, you know, I'm looking at a photo of a fire hydrant in the middle of a sidewalk. We don't need a consultant to tell us, you gotta move the fire hydrant. Give me $1.98 and I'll tell you, just move it. You get a hold of the water department and tell them, guys, you gotta move the fire plug. You gotta move it over. There's some common sense things in here that it just, provide for transportation alternatives to Wallingford destinations. Explore the opportunities. We talked about bike routes and bike racks and everything. We've been talking about bike racks downtown for 5 years, over 5 years. Never got done. Never got done. Here it is, provide incentives or requirements for provision of bike racks at town's center business. Never happened. Work with the state DOT in Sprague to identify opportunities for bike lanes. Not gonna happen. I can't, in good conscience, vote to spend $35,000 on yet another study for the downtown. We've got study after study after study after study of the downtown. They all have these great acronyms, great concepts, all of this type of stuff. It's going no place, absolutely no place. There's no money for this. I can't see, unless the state, because they have an unlimited amount of money up there, giving us big grant money, but with that grant money also comes a town contribution. We're going to go into a tough fiscal year. You're going to be listening to us in a few weeks up here, grappling with our budget. There's going to be people coming to the microphone. Please don't raise our taxes. It's okay, folks. It's okay. You're going to have a bike lane. Don't worry about it. I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's a great idea. Some of this stuff is good ideas. Some of it is just common sense, plain common sense. I don't know why we need to hire somebody to put out this great plan that it's not going to happen. One of the things I'm still waiting for is on Route 5. That was, I think it was over 12 years ago, maybe longer, that there was a great study done between the North Haven line and the Meriden line of Route 5 to take out the hourglasses. We still have them. There's more traffic on Route 5 now than we've ever had. It never got done. Never got done. And I'm sure that cost us dearly for that. Or unless the state paid for it out of their endless pot of money, but it never got done. I just can't support this. I think it's just a waste of money. Point blank, it's a waste of money. So that's it, Mr. Chairman. I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share my colleagues' concerns. If I had some reason to believe that this plan would actually be followed, I think our downtown needs a lot of TLC. But I don't think that it's the appropriate use of money. I attended a meeting here in this room last night, planning and zoning, talking about, the downtown district. There's a lot of work going into that, and there was a lot of questions by the law department and by the public to change. We have a relatively good uptown, and I think, I think from my perspective, do what planning and zoning is doing now with the downtown district and firm that up and let it build itself up and be nice. But I don't see this. During the POCD thing, the consultant and I got into it because he claimed that there's enough room right now on Center Street for a bike lane. I doubt he's ever traveled Center Street. On Center Street for a bike lane. And I asked him like 3 times, and I don't know how that's physically possible. I don't even know that fact-finding at this time would be appropriate because we have the high-speed rail, air finger quotes, starting this spring, which is possibly going to affect on-street parking in that area because of the parking situation there. So another year from now, the data that's collected may be stale, and now we're spending $200-something thousand on a report that, the end game we can't use. I just, it can't be master of all or jack of all trades. I just don't think that this is the way to go at this time. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly. Any other comments from the council? Comments from the public?
I'm Representative Mary Mashinsky again, and speaking in favor of accepting the grant. And congratulations for winning it, by the way. Not everybody wins one of those. Commuter rail service is coming very soon, May of this year. And we can make the most of this very nice opportunity by creating a transit-oriented development overlay zone around the train station and the lower downtown, and then using it to create a walkable center with more housing choices that strengthen the town's future. There are now 40 municipalities in the state with regular, dependable transit service, and most of them are already taking steps to take advantage of this transit service in this market. Among them are Windsor, Windsor Locks, Berlin, Meriden, Fairfield, Stratford, Norwalk, Stamford, Old Saybrook, Branford, Guilford, Stonington, Waterford, Clinton, West Haven, Orange, Milford, Bridgeport, Brookfield, Bethel, Ridgefield, and Naugatuck, all different types of communities. And the value is for their residents that they can produce other types of housing to attract, to provide for boomers who need to downsize their homes and millennials who as a group prefer to have a smaller, less expensive housing choice. And they do like to use the pedestrian and bike access to their homes. On average, households spend about 30% of their income on housing, 19% on transportation, and 6 to 12% on energy costs. So if they live within a half mile of a transit service, they can reduce their transit costs to 9%. So then they have 10% left over that they can invest in something else. Whether it be saving for their long-term housing or purchasing health care or child care or going out to dinner in downtown Wallingford or whatever. And then when they live together in density units, as is true in many of these transit-oriented developments, they're also saving on their heating costs because they have shared walls and ceilings and floors, and they reduce that portion of their income that's spent on heat, giving them more discretionary spending. So this is why this is attractive to millennials. We have, in our town, our over 65 population is going to grow by about 13% by 2030. And many of these folks will want to sell their single-family homes and move into something more affordable. It's down near the shopping and church and transportation. And we can offer them the option of staying here in Wallingford and live near the train station. And then we have the school-age population, which is slated to shrink 3% by 2030. The millennial workers that we want to attract to town can live near the station. They can easily get to jobs in Hartford or New Haven or even Fairfield County. They can avoid owning a car, or they could own one and leave it parked for most of the week and use it less often. And then when they've decided they like Wallingford and they want to stay here, say they've been to Gavea Vineyards and they really like the place, they want to stay here and live in Wallingford, then they can switch places with the boomers who want to sell their big house and strengthen our grand list. So 40 towns are already working on this, and we can join them to become an active player in this transit-oriented development. It gives folks more flexibility. We can improve the zone with changing parking requirements, setbacks, and improving the bike and pedestrian access, which is what this grant does. We can even, if we want, go all the way to what some towns are doing, which is identifying key parcels and then bringing in, partnering with a developer to work on mixed, density mixed with retail in these zones. I know I was also active as Councilor Morgenstein was with the transit-oriented development and the consultant, and when he looked at the new train station area, he said it was still heavily industrial, which is left over from when the train station was connected to local industry and the train yard. So it's still built like an industrial area, and in order to make it more housing choices and have a more walkable neighborhood, we have to revise that so that boomers and millennials will want to live there. So there's great potential here, and like these 40 other towns, I can see us doing this renovation of this area and making for a much stronger future for our town. So I hope you will vote for this. I wanted to bring partnership for a strong community with me. They offered to come and talk about some of the other towns, but my speaker is ill today, so he's not here. But he said he will come another day. And I have slides from some of the other TOD projects that I'd be happy to bring also if both of us can come at another time. So congratulations on winning the grant. It was competitive, and you did really well to win that, and I hope you will approve it. And I also want to mention that Councilor Fishbein and I are supposed to meet with DOT about the hourglass problem. We haven't had the meeting yet, but we are going to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Morgenstein.
Larry Morgenstein, South Main Street. This is a question for Rep. Mashinsky, Engineer Baltramitis, and Planning and Zoning, Mrs. Han. There was months ago, there was a meeting for the Quinnipiac Linear Trail, and they talked about the entry to Hall Avenue. Does this plan, I see this as like a global sort of thing. Will this tie in, and could the resources from the linear trail people for those improvements be tied into this plan too? Because we're talking Hall Avenue, the linear trail, the senior center, and then you're not that far from the train station, Parker, and all that. So is that part of a more global plan? Because we're talking about a future here, a vision for what this town can be in the future, and I could understand the frustration from Councilor Letourneau in that it's been talked to death for many years. But the problem is that we want to relieve the burden on our taxpayers. And if we could grow this town and make it more vibrant, improve upon what we already have to build on, which is considerable, this is the opportunity to look at. Maybe this will be the time. I can understand the frustration, but if any of you could speak to whether that'll be connected into the linear trail plans too.
Yeah, Mr. Morgenstein, the short answer is yes. So the trail project that we're currently going into final design and potentially really trying to get it constructed this year, and that's the trail from the senior center out to the dredge ponds at the end of Oak Street. The other component of that project are pedestrian and aesthetic improvements along Hall Avenue from Community Lake Park opposite River Road all the way down near this area. I was able to get the state to approve expanding those limits to North Cherry Street. So we only have a small block between North Cherry Street and the railroad tracks that's uncovered, or it's just not covered by a streetscape project, if you will. However, we're hoping to address that short block in a project with the public parking that we have, adjacent to North Cherry Street, Hall Avenue, and Quinnipiac Street. So we're hoping that it does all to come together as 3 projects into one.
And is there already funding available for those things that you speak of at this point?
Those other 2 projects, construction is fully funded.
So again, we could make a bigger difference when we link these things and see it as a bigger sort of project that really affects us more globally. And again, to make a difference, there has to be a vision and a follow-through on it. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? There being none, I bring it back to the council. Councilor Laffin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Robin, Casey, you guys both think this is good to accept the grant?
Yeah, I don't want to give a long-winded answer.
No, yeah,
but
just yes, no, yeah.
No, I do. And what I was hoping I conveyed during my presentation is this really is more than a study. This is getting ink on paper with the design that, could take us forward and be the basis of grant monies for a construction project.
Well, I support it then. I know you both have relatively young but successful you're standing both as the department heads. I know you climbed up through. So I'm trusting your judgment and that you've applied and then won, and now you're asking us to accept that this is something you believe in and you're not just trying to throw away money, that you feel like it's going to actually help you do your jobs and be good for the town. So I will support it.
If I could just say, this was the plan. Now we're trying to implement the plan. So the next step to implement the plan is to have the design done, and we've been given an opportunity to get money to do that.
Exactly.
So we don't want to let the plan sit on the shelf. We're trying not to do that, and I think this is the next step to do that.
And for all those years of, so we won grant money, we got studies done and we didn't do anything with it. We spent all this time coming up with this document, and then there was criticism when this document was being drafted that we didn't do anything with the other documents. So here we are trying to do something with the document. We got some, extra free money, discounted money, whatever you want to call it. So, thank you.
Mayor, am I correct to recall that we probably voted in favor of applying for this grant?
Sometimes, not necessarily. I'm not sure this one required it, did it?
It did. In May of last year, the council approved
Okay.
a resolution to apply for the grant.
Thank you. And so based upon that, the 2 of you and some other people in Town Hall have done a bunch of work to put this grant application together, and we won the grant. So thank you for your work. I certainly appreciate it, and I do see the value in the town spending $35,000 to get a $210,000 benefit. So, thank you for your work. Councilor Fishbein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to be a dead horse, but just conceptually, if this was not to pass, isn't it true that a private developer could come to the town and say, I'd like to do these things? Could do the research themselves on their dime?
I don't know why a private developer would do streetscape improvements for all of that entire portion of Route 5.
Will they?
So unless we had a new development come in that encompassed that entire area.
Last night, when the commission was talking about the downtown district, we were talking about buildings that were close to the street, and I thought streetscapes were part of that discussion.
The treatment on the private portions of the property are, yes.
Yeah.
But that's different than what we're talking about, a cohesive linkage between the station and the downtown.
But that would be an example of a public-private partnership, where, the town would pay less than potentially what they'd be doing here, partner with a developer as they develop the area at less cost to the taxpayer.
I don't foresee, we could require some of the streetscape improvements on a case-by-case basis if we were to see a development between Center Street and the rail station as a cohesive development.
As I said, I don't disagree. I mean, the whole, I just don't see it ever happening. I really, I mean, we're talking about, we can't even get our land records online. I mean, we're talking about closing a pool. I mean, and we're gonna spend, after this, potentially a lot of money that we can't afford, that we're gonna have to be going to someone else for another grant. And I just don't think that's responsible, so, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor Testa?
Thank you. I don't think there's ever been a situation where there was noticeable, meaningful development without, again, meaningful involvement on the part of the community. I think developers look for it. I think it's necessary. There has to be some type of investment in the big picture. I can understand, looking at an expenditure and saying, geez, we can't afford this today. I can't see spending the money on something that, has potential long-term benefits. Or I don't see us ever doing this. Those are, that's kind of defeatist, and that runs counter to the whole idea of vision. And if a community doesn't demonstrate some type of commitment to laying out what investors can see as a vision, you're not going to gain the kind of confidence, I believe, that's going to, lead people to want to write a check and invest in our community. They can't see sort of a tentative acceptance of the idea, because they're afraid that, well, gee, I start investing in this community, and they may they're not on board with me. 3 years from now, 5 years from now, when things really start to roll, they could start pulling back. And the only way that I think they're going to come to the table is if we show a continued, ongoing commitment to this type of thing. And if that requires us to put some investment into it, then so be it. All we have to do is look at our successful industrial parks and other areas that have grown and have proven to be the backbone of our tax base, to see that they, at some point or another, the town stepped up and said, this is what we're going to do. So I think this is the type of thing we need to encourage, and we have the funds to invest in something that has long-term benefits, and I think it's a good idea. So nice work on this, by the way.
Councilor Letourneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to take off on Councilor Testa's items, we have a developer that came to town, and without doing any streetscape improvements, without doing anything, and that's the Parker Place development. Casey, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's about 300 units that he's adding down there.
He's adding 199, I think, somewhere in that area.
Okay, and that's going to be coupled with something. I think it's
The
going to be total
existing.
about 300
Yes.
units down there.
Yep.
And, that's a private developer, and very smart fellow, a very smart group that did that. They're out ahead of the game. Meriden has been out ahead of the game for quite some time, but we do have plans in place, and we do show developers that we are serious about the downtown. We have a transit-oriented district. We have planning and zoning has been struggling for probably the last 6 months on the downtown. They talked about it last night. Some changes there to bring development in, to ease some of the restrictions, to bring development in. That's good planning. That is what we need. Again, Councilor Fishbein covered a little bit, but in 5 years, whether I'm here or out there, and whether you're here or working someplace else, I don't see this plan getting done. And I'm gonna come back, whether I'm here or out there, and say, where is it? Where is it? And I hope I get the answer that, well, it's all done. It's all done. It's fantastic. It's all implemented. That would be a miracle in this town. I don't see it happening. But, you know, it's not that I don't want things to happen downtown. I just don't want to waste money doing common sense stuff and doing stuff that we don't have to do. I don't even want to get started on a linear trail with that whole fiasco with coming out of the senior center and improvements on sidewalks, and we had to study that, and we have to hire experts and everything to show us that we can rebuild the sidewalk. That people are going to actually park in the senior center and go on a sidewalk to the linear trail. I don't see it. And just as last, Representative Mashinsky, thank you very much for your comment with Councilor Fishbein that you're going to cobble together a plan for the state. It only took 15 years to do it, but there's still hope that we can get that Route 5 taken care of. Thank you.
Mayor?
Yeah, I think everyone is rightfully concerned about how we spend money and what we spend our time on. Certainly the two offices that have presented this at this point have spent a lot of time considering what options we have and what direction to go. I would point to a series of projects that at one point were not received well, and that started with the railroad station green and then moved up Center Street and ultimately ended at Elm Street and included North and South Main for a distance, and then went down Quinnipiac Street. And it was streetscapes. It wasn't done to the degree that everyone wanted, but I think probably most of us would agree that those projects have had a positive impact on the walkability, the aesthetics, the pride we all feel in Wallingford. And I think the downtown, and I use downtown to mean all portions of the center of town, but there's been a benefit. Now this is really talking about extending that kind of treatment, and it has been discussed before, moving along Route 5 to Church Street, and in the other direction, moving down to Prince Street. This takes it a little further. I think it is of great benefit to have some idea about what an actual design would be like and what is really physically possible and what maybe can't be done with consensus of agreement. But we know that dealing with streetscape has an impact. People now walk in our downtown, whereas before you never saw anyone walking on the sidewalks. Now you see people, they drive into the center of town just to take a walk. So the money issue is a serious one, but I think we have a template that has worked elsewhere. And I think it's appropriate that we take a serious look at whether that template can be applied and have the same benefits or be afforded to the town that have occurred elsewhere.
Councilor Laffin?
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to comment too on the Meriden thing as well. Like, Meriden has been going forward, but it's like, what, 95% with state money? I mean, that they've been doing all of their growth, and we just want a little bit of it here. But with that, I want to call the question.
There's a motion and a second to call the question. All those in favor of calling the question signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
I hear two in opposition. The majority is in favor of calling the question. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Fishbein,
No.
Laffin,
Yes.
Paterno,
No.
Marone,
Yes.
Morgenstein,
Yes.
Shortell,
Yes.
Testa,
Yes.
Zandri,
Yes.
Chairman Cervoni.
Yes. Motion carries. We've accepted the grant. Thanks for your work.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time this evening.
Next up is item 7, which is discussion regarding road salt. We also have a request to waive Rule 5. So is there a motion to waive Rule 5? to
So
allow
moved.
Discussion on adding road salt, moving money for road salt and
Whole thing right now.
waive Rule 5. Yes, we do need a,
Whole thing. Okay.
yes.
And I'll second that.
The motion will be to waive Rule 5 to discuss the approval of a transfer of $30,000 from Public Works regular wages to the overtime accounts to cover expenses until the end of the fiscal year, and transfers in the amount of $38,000 from contingency, $20,000 from Town Hall HVAC control accounts for a total of $58,000 to the materials and supplies account for the purchase of 1,000 tons of road salt.
Second.
Motion and a second by Councilor Fishbein. All those in favor of adding that item to the agenda by waiving Rule 5 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the item's on the agenda. Councilor Laffin, will you move the item?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve a transfer of $30,000 from Public Works regular wages to the overtime accounts to cover expenses until the end of the fiscal year, and transfers in the amount of $38,000 from contingency and $20,000 from the Town Hall HVAC control accounts for a total of $58,000 to the materials and supplies account for the purchase of 1,000 tons of road salt.
Second.
Moved and second. Good evening, Mr. McCullough.
Good evening.
Mr. Palermo.
Good evening.
To my right is Mr. Palermo. I believe Councilor Marone had questions on the use of the road salt.
I did.
Answer any questions you may have.
Why don't we start with Councilor Marone then?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So my questions are really not so much, I understand you have the capacity to store a certain amount of salt, and obviously it's been a rough winter, and so you perhaps use more salt than expected. My question is not so much about the consumption of the salt, because obviously your department does a great job at keeping the roads passable. My question is really about the crisis that arose on February 9th, where we received an email from the administration indicating that we were on the verge of running out of salt. And my question was about how the crisis arose and when we determined that we had an issue where we could potentially run out of salt. And then the follow-up to that would be, if one of us had an objection, we couldn't have an emergency meeting, would we have run out of salt and left people, in a terrible predicament?
I can answer that, Counselor. Since I became foreman in 2011, we have had a reserve stock in our yard of 1,000 to 1,500 tons of road salt. Therefore, we will not run out of road salt. I don't know if you recall back when we had the blizzard, we were down towards our reserve number. 1,500 tons of road salt, approximately 4 storms, depending on the severity of the storms. Back in the blizzard, I had ordered 1,500 to 1,800 tons of road salt 3 weeks prior to the blizzard because our supplies were starting to get diminished. The governor then put a hold on all road salt because there was a problem with deliveries from the barges from down south. Governor put a hold on salt. My planning during those times was totally ignored. It didn't matter if I had ordered a month before or 2 weeks before. It was totally ignored, and the state took all deliveries of road salt. The Public Works Department, after the blizzard, was down to approximately 400 tons of road salt. That's roughly one storm, once again, depending on the severity of the storms. We had some connections with the state, and the state actually spotted us another 400 ton of salt because we did get more snow after the blizzard. and that was the only thing that pulled us through until we could get our deliveries. Our deliveries come out of Providence, Rhode Island. We're not the only game in town with them. Some days I get 2 trucks coming in the yard, and some days I get 20 trucks in the yard. When we asked for the salt on the 8th, we still had a reserve. They were predicting stormy weather all the next week. And while I said we had enough in our reserve to cover, it was time to order. On the 9th, the approval was granted. As soon as Mr. McCully called me and told me the funds were available, I proceeded to order 1,000 tons of road salt. We received a partial delivery on February 13th, a partial delivery on the 14th, and the final delivery of the 1,000 on the 15th. We have responded to 17 major events in town this year, as well as 8 after-hours calls. We assist the fire department when they have a house fire. Hoses are running in order to, ensure firefighter safety. They may call us and tell us, hey, the road's getting icy. We need a salt truck out here to salt the road. We supply water and sewer with their salt. We bill them at the end of the year because we have the storage facility to hold it, as well as the electric division now.
The bottom line, Councilor Marone, is that the responsibility lies with Steve and myself, that we cannot run out of salt. This $200,000 per truck, snowplow truck, is absolutely useless without materials to treat the road. And we just don't want to be in that position. They're forecasting another storm coming our way. I watched the weather today. So we're faced with making that judgment. And no disrespect intended, but if it takes a telephone vote to get us the salt, I think the public safety is number one. And as I just said, we cannot run out of salt. And I never want to be in that position.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, and that makes perfect sense. And again, this body is usually very deliberative, and our responsibility is on the financial side. So we can't, we can't order salt. We can't enable you to get salt. Obviously, you're the experts in how that happens. So my concern, I guess, is more in the 11th hour plea for salt. And now we're waiving rule, as a very deliberative body, now we're waiving Rule 5 again to talk about the overtime wages, which was sort of the predictable offshoot of having so much adverse weather. So I guess when we knew that there was a crisis on the salt, I guess, so the meeting was going to be on the 13th, I believe it was, or the 12th, was the actual council meeting. The item was already on the agenda. How can in the future can we avoid a situation where it becomes an emergency, that the financial body could be a barrier to the keeping the roads salted? I'm not sure this is a question even for you gentlemen, or if it is perhaps for the administration.
There's no way to prevent that. It all depends upon the frequency of storms. I mean, planning is for them to identify that they are running out of salt. And if they expect one storm in a week and they get 3, or other incidents such as fires or whatever else, and they're using up the salt, they're going to respond not because they don't have something for the next storm, but they want to make sure they have enough to deal with maybe one after that because of the delivery issues and their experience in the past with not being able to get the salt. So they're very proactive. I don't see any way to avoid during inclement weather, winter especially, where you can't predict what the conditions will be. And another issue is it's not always a storm. You can have a snowstorm, I should say. You can have a light rain, and then the temperature suddenly drops. The police call Public Works and say, you got to get out there. We've got icing roads all over town. I know there have been winters where we haven't had much snow to push around, but they've been out 13 or 14 times because of icing issues as a result of rain. And at night, naturally, the temperature drops, and then they have ice on hills or elsewhere. So it's as unpredictable as the weather, which really prevents a necessarily logical and metronome certainty about when you need to order salt.
So I guess the only logical conclusion here is we're underfunded on salt, whether that be due to particular weather patterns this year or other years. How do we calculate what we budget? And this could to either group. How do we calculate what we budget for salt in a given year?
We take a 5-year average.
Okay.
We take 5 years, average that, and that's the amount we fund.
So based on that, then we're to presume that this year was an exceptional year with regard to winter storms?
I don't know if we're having more transfers of this kind this year than other years or not. Certainly, I know we've gone through the same process other years. This is not unique. It's happened other years, so they'd have to look at the books. But we take a 5-year average. They take the end of the last year and they add up 5 years, see what that average is, and that's what we budget.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Morone, bear with me for a minute on the numbers because I've been up all night. Just for example, on the storm of 3.7 and 3.8, we used approximately 600 tons of salt. That's a lot of salt. We also had about a foot of snow on the road. Our policy is to pre-treat the road right before it snows, plow the roads. As you get a foot of snow, you're plowing some of that salt off. For example, in Councilor Zandri's neighborhood, Lincoln, Jefferson, Jackson, Parson, Ward Street Extension, all these big hills. Sometimes the salt has to be reapplied 3 or 4 times to get up those hills. The money that we put down in salt in a bigger storm like that gives our trucks traction, and it actually avoids breakage on the trucks. The axles in those trucks are $400 a piece. 4 axles in a storm is at $1,600, and we don't stock 4 axles at a time. We stock 2 or 3, what we can. A rear end for those trucks is $4,000 at the minimum. We blow a rear end in a truck or 2, we have 2 spare trucks. We blow 2 rear ends, we're down a truck on a run. And that's why when those bigger storms, sometimes we have to use a lot more salt. So there's no way to predict how much we're going to use or when we're going to run out. There's really no way to predict that. Today's storm, they were calling at 5 a.m. this morning when Dr. Menzo called me, they were calling for 14 inches of snow on the road. I anticipated using another 600 or 800 tons of salt. As of today at 4:30 when I left the office, we were at approximately 441 tons. And that's not including, that's including the roads, all the municipal buildings, parking lots that we maintain. I know it sounds like, it's a ton of money. It is. It's a lot of money. But unfortunately, I mean, now they're calling for another storm next week. We're transferring more money for more salt. We're down to our reserve pile. I hope this ends soon. Believe me, this is not fun. The guys are tired. The equipment's starting to take a beating. Everybody's had enough. So, we're doing the best we can with predicting the weather. They're calling for another nor'easter now Tuesday possibly coming in. We're all hoping it's rain. I will call tomorrow morning and order another 1,000 tons and hopefully get a delivery by tomorrow's Wednesday. Hopefully I'll start getting deliveries by Friday or Monday, but we do have enough salt in the bin for this next nor'easter supposedly on Tuesday.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want people to get the impression that we just go out and dump all the salt. I think, can you share with them the different treatments?
Yeah, it's basically an as-needed kind of deal. When we get black ice, we use obviously a little bit more salt. The salt goes down. The pre-treat process is the salt goes down right before it storms. Last night, a full staff was in at Public Works at midnight. When I got home after work last night, they said we're supposed to start at 9 o'clock. If the police call me at 9 o'clock and say it's snowing, obviously I'm going to dispatch the guys earlier. We came in at midnight. At 12:15 last night, it started snowing. Public Works went out. We treat the road. The snow hits the salt dissolves, forms a brine. The brine seeps into the pores and cracks in the road and prevents that bonding. Years ago, when I was a driver with the department, we would use approximately 20 tons of sand to 4 tons of road salt mix. I can remember vividly driving down South Airline Road at 20 miles an hour when we used to get the hard pack from that snow bonding and launching a 20-ton truck across 2 lanes of traffic in front of oncoming cars. It's not a good time. So this stuff prevents the snow from bonding to the road and forming that hard pack. We used to spend days here with the grader going out on the roads and scraping that hard pack off the road. You get the big potholes like you see up in Vermont, Maine by all the ski resorts, the snow potholes because there's a foot of hard pack on the road. This prevents that from doing that. We plow the road. As we're plowing, like I said before, in Councilor Zandri's neighborhood, all those hills, salt has to be reapplied as you're plowing because obviously the truck's losing traction on the hills. We do have chains. That last big storm, we chained up. We chained up half a dozen trucks. Problem with chains is you can only do about 10 miles an hour. 10 miles an hour in a heavy snowstorm doesn't allow the plow to push the snow off the edges of the road. It stays in the road, builds up, and then we have narrow downtown roads, which doesn't work for EMS either. Once we get halfway through a big storm like that, as we're plowing, we apply salt as needed. Our drivers have mostly all been on their runs for several years now, and they know that run, and they know where to apply it and where to not. The flats get obviously a lot less salt than the hills get. When we finish plowing, the storm is stopped, we go back, push everything back to the curb usually. This time of year, we avoid pushing back to the curb because we're trying to do minimal curb damage to repair in the spring because the ground's soft, there's no frost in the ground. We go back and we push it back as far as we can, open the fronts of the catch basins to avoid flooding of streets, and reapply the salt. On the way in tonight, the Public Works Department put down salt because it was snowing again. They finished off the loads they had on the trucks all day they carried, still in that 441 ton, and salted the roads. That should hold us through the night. It should. A lot of times it does. But we don't just go out and randomly dump salt. A lot of times people will call and say, hey, it's not even snowing yet, and you're putting salt on the road. An hour later, it's snowing an inch an hour, and that salt and brine are working on the road. That's why we basically do it how we do it.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that, and I appreciate all your feedback. And again, to reiterate, you guys do a great job. And I have no concerns with your methodology as far as how the salt's being put down, because the roads are certainly kept, in excellent condition. My concern was more centers around the idea that if I was unreachable for a morning, and then you have the need to have an emergency meeting, which would be difficult to have on a Friday between, when we found out about this issue at say 9 a.m. and Friday afternoon, if you can't get a quorum for the meeting, and then is there a scenario where we run out of salt?
We will not run out of salt.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mayor?
I don't want to prolong it. Obviously, you could end up with a public safety crisis where people weren't available. And would we not do what we had to do in order to protect the public safety? We would do what we had to do to protect the public safety. But in the process, we tried to follow all the rules and regulations. But in the final hour, one responsibility outweighs another.
Councilor Zandri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. I just have a quick question, but before my question, I just want to kind of add on to what you said, Steve, about like the hills. A lot of times people are always thinking about people getting up the hills. It's the other direction that's the bigger impact. And you called out my neighborhood, and that's a very good example. People sliding down Lincoln Avenue can't stop. They're going to end up in South Main Street, and they're going to hit somebody. So I think it can't be underscored enough, the pre-treating of those roads. I mean, when you live in the neighborhood, like myself, and I know it's too dangerous, I'll go up to Cedar Street and come down the neighborhood. People leaving the neighborhood, they think, okay, Hillsview's not too bad. They reach that last little part of it, they slide right out into South Main, and they hit somebody. So you can't underscore what needs to get done for cleaning those roads. You guys do a fantastic job. And I even to your sentiment about not cutting right to the curbs right now, I think that's smart for the reasons that you outline, and then even the additional ones that you might even think about is it does tend to get 40 and 45 degrees this time of year, and that'll melt away fairly quickly between the storms as long as they stay minor like this. My question was just for my own clarification. The mayor mentioned that the budget that gets put together is using a 5-year average. Now, is that a 5-year average of the original budget you asked for, or is it a 5-year average including all the transfers?
It's actual usage.
So that would be, just for the sake of discussion, if you guys had a $100,000 budget and then asked for $50,000 worth of transfers, it would be 150, add up the years, then average it.
Correct.
Okay, so good. That allows me to understand that in a year you guys had a budget, we also approved some transfers, that's all being taken into consideration. So that was just information that I wanted for myself. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just for information, the salt doesn't go bad.
Right.
We keep it in our building year long. We were thankful to have leftover one year when we had that storm, that freak storm in October. I mean, if we had no salt in that building, we would have been in big trouble.
Right.
And that storm in October, I think that year dumped almost a foot of snow. So we do reuse it the next year.
Councilor Morgenstein.
Yeah, my question, I'm not sure if it's for Mr. McCully or Mr. Bose. So, again, new to things. We're taking money out of contingency, but we're also taking money out of T-Hall HVAC controls / dampers.
Yes, those are two items that are in Mr. McCauley's budget currently, and they'll be transferred to that materials and supplies account to refurbish.
So when Mr. McCully did his budget and asked for money for those things, he approximated that you would be needing to replace or repair or buy things that went into this category that you
It
now
was
marked on?
upgrading the controls and dampers in the town hall.
And that project's basically done, and there's some left over to be
So
spent.
that was left over?
Correct.
Okay, so it's not contingency because it was used
No,
for
It was
that,
budgeted.
but
It was a capital
budgeted.
item.
That's correct.
And I guess just for my information, so if this had not been used by Mr. McCully and we were going into the new budget season, what would that money have
That money, the general fund, by law and by general accounting practices for governments, for local governments, it would be closed out, either into the surplus. It would either increase the surplus or decrease your deficit for that fiscal year.
Is there ever a case where Mr. McCully, at the end of the year, or I suppose he would have to come to this body if he decided, I want to buy a new dump truck or something with that money instead? It would come before?
He would have to come before you folks, that's correct.
Yeah.
We have no authority to move monies administratively with the exception of $500. A maximum of $500, that was just recently increased through charter change, by the mayor within a budget. In
500 or?
$500 per line item, so it can't be $500 times 10 times, it's $500 for the whole fiscal year. So if Mr.
Any capital equipment shows up in my budget that's presented to the mayor and the council.
Anything over 500 each item? Okay, great, thank you.
One other thing, I was just trying to get Chairman Cervoni's attention. I don't know if you talked about it when I had to leave for a second or two, but the price also comes into effect here, which is why these gentlemen have to use the usage rather than dollar amounts. Sometimes, and it seems like the last couple of years, the price on the asphalt has gone up.
Yes.
We bid it, of course, and I think this year it's around $82 a ton, give or take, and it's been as low as 72, 74, 75. It seems like the storms, it seems like it's, and I have no data on this, I'm just kind of just eyeballing it from a bird's eye. It seems like when the winters are bad throughout the nation, the next year's prices spike up on salt and road materials, so that's another factor. And this year, it is a higher price.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the public? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Go get some sleep. Item 8 has been removed. Nothing for item 9, And also, items 11 and 12 have been removed, which leaves item 10.
Mr. Chairman, I move we go into executive session pursuant to Section 1-206E and 1-210B5B to discuss confidential commercial and financial information regarding a potential development proposal.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of going into executive session signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the council in executive session. Call the meeting back to order. Is there a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare the council back in public session. There being no further business on the agenda, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I declare this meeting adjourned.